young adult class at Good Shepherd Methodist Church. And Dr. Simon Glynn, who among many other accolades, teaches philosophy at FAU, has a PhD from the University of Manchester, UK, where they are, what is it, Mancotious?
Mendacious.
Mancunians are mendacious, yeah. Has a master's degree from McMaster. Has taught philosophy at Manchester and U, Georgia. So that's pretty much a rundown of the panelists.
I taught at Berkeley.
Berkeley?
Yeah.
Pick a
I
card.
didn't know you did.
One card.
We taught at Harvard.
This is the order of the opening statements.
What? I was asked to lecture at the Royal Academy and I turned it down because they wouldn't pay my airfare. What?
Okay, I guess I go first.
Dr. Simon has won the paper toss.
Okay, evolution versus creation. Yeah, I think there's two things here. First of all, why it is that people seem to believe in creationism, and secondly, why they're wrong. I suppose people believe in creationism because it gives them an argument for the existence of God, where otherwise they have to rely on faith. It appears to be a compelling argument, only when you examine it, it really is. The argument around something like this, all effectively the universe, which is everything that there is, the sum total of not just the physical world, I mean our physical world, and all the planets around that, the solar system, and all the solar systems, and so on, and the galaxy, and all the galaxies. The sum total of everything that there is, the universe, must have a cause. And as we can't know what caused the universe, it must have been caused by God. Or another version of that is that the Earth comes, as most geologists and scientists agree, probably from the sun. It's the hardening of the gases and so on around the sun. The sun comes from, well, they say a cosmic explosion or a Big Bang. And the Big Bang has to come from somewhere, and the Big Bang, or the cosmic gases that got together, are supposed to come from God. Now, it's a fallacious argument for a number of reasons. One reason is that, of course, if the universe is everything that there is, it couldn't have had a cause. Because in order for something to be the cause of something, it must exist before it. So, for example, if somebody shoots me in the head and I drop down dead, we say that shooting me in the head made me drop down dead. But if I drop down dead first, and then somebody shoots me in the head, we say that shooting me in the head didn't cause me to drop down dead. So the whole argument for creationism is based on the notion of causality. God created everything that there was, and then God created the various species and so on. Now, if the universe is all that is, it can't have an outside. Because if it had an outside, there'd be something that is excluded. It wasn't, and it wouldn't be all that is.
I have to disagree with one of the arguments.
Hang on, wait a minute until I finish.
Yeah, let's let them run first, and then we'll do that if you can.
If,
I can't, I don't have the paper to take notes.
well, perhaps you can remember it.
I can't.
Okay, what's the problem?
You said the only reason for the universe to exist was that the argument for why people believe in a cause. I said there's other reasons.
I didn't say that. What I said was that one of the reasons that people believe that the universe must have had a cause is because it gave them a convenient argument for the existence of God.
Well, there's other reasons.
Anyhow, let's...
Can we permit us 10
You
minutes,
used the word
please?
only, I'm sorry. You used the word only. I said there's other reasons.
Okay. Well, we can get to that later. That's fine.
If the universe is everything that there is, which is by definition what it is, because if it had an outside, it wouldn't be everything that there is. There'd be something outside it if it wasn't. Then it wouldn't be the universe. And just as the universe can't have an outside in space, because it wouldn't be everything that there is, the universe has to exist for all eternity, because it can't have an outside in time. There can't have been a before the universe, because then the universe wouldn't be all that there was. So if there can't be a before the universe, there can't have been something that existed before the universe to cause it.
Go on.
If there can't have been something, if there can't have been something, it's a complex argument already without
Right.
He's just getting the boots.
The universe by definition is everything that there is. Therefore, there can't be anything outside of the universe. And by the same notion, there can't be anything before the universe. Because if there was something before the universe existed, then it wouldn't be the universe, because the universe is everything. Now, we did just say, didn't we, that cause had to come before effect. So if God created the universe, God had to exist before the universe existed. And yet the universe is everything that is. And therefore God couldn't have existed before the universe existed. Indeed, if God exists, then God, him or herself or itself, has to be a part of the universe. Because if you exist, you're part of the universe, because the universe is everything. So if God were to create the universe, and God were a part of the universe, what you were saying is that the part created the whole, which makes no sense. Because our normal understanding of cause and effect is that the cause is different from the effect. So if God does exist, then God is a part of the universe. If God is a part of the universe, then God couldn't have created the universe, because a part of something can't create, in the sense of cause, the whole. Because the cause has got to be different from the effect. That's the first point. The second point is that even if you accepted that God caused the universe, even if we forget that argument, and that's one argument that stands by itself, the second wholly independent argument is that if God caused the universe, then who caused God? Now there are two possible answers to that. One is nobody did, God didn't need anything. In which case you're using an argument that's disingenuous, because on the one hand you're arguing for God because you say everything needs a cause. The universe is everything, so it needs a cause, so there must be something that caused it, which is God. Created it, which is God. But if everything needs a cause, then why suddenly do you suspend the argument when it comes to God? Everything needs a cause but God. If you're going to make an exception in the case of God and say everything needs a cause apart from God, why can't I just make an exception in the case of the universe and say, look, the universe didn't come from anywhere because there was nowhere other than the universe for it to come from. And it's not going anywhere because there's nowhere else other than the universe for it to go to. The amount of matter in the universe may change into energy, and the energy may change into matter. Some, E equals mc squared, mass can turn into energy, as Einstein showed. And if you focus energy, you can create matter. But the sum total of mass energy remains constant. There's no place for it to go. So the universe didn't come from anywhere, any more than it will go anywhere. Everybody believes, or most people believe, that the universe as a whole, not this Earth, but the universe as a whole will go on to infinity. So it's very strange. We believe it had a beginning in time, but it has no end. That's very asymmetric. If it has no end, why do we imagine it came from anywhere at all? It always was. The sum total of matter energy always was. It's only because in our limited experience of individual beings or individual entities, they seem to have to come from somewhere. So we then extrapolate and say, because individual entities or beings come from somewhere, then the totality of being comes from somewhere. And that's an illegitimate extrapolation. But what's something true of parts of the whole aren't necessarily true of the whole. So because the parts have to come from other parts, and they in turn come from other parts, doesn't mean that the whole has to come from anywhere at all. Another problem is, so the whole problem then is if God caused the universe, but God doesn't need a cause, that's disingenuous. Why do we say the universe needs a cause? On the other hand, you might say, well, God did cause the universe, but everything needs a cause, but so God self-caused it. So the argument was, first of all, that the universe didn't need a cause. But secondly, people who didn't recognize that said, oh yes, it does, and God's the cause. And I say, well, if the universe needs a cause, why doesn't God need a cause? And they say, because they either say God doesn't need a cause, in which case that's asymmetric. I mean, everything needs a cause. That was the argument for the existence of the universe. So why should God be an exception? And if God is the other way around, which is say that God's self-caused, well, that's impossible because we've just agreed, haven't we, that the cause has got to come before the effect. So God as cause has got to come before God as effect. God, in other words, has got to be schizophrenic and be able to pull him or herself up by his or her own bootstraps, which is logically impossible. A thing can't cause itself. That's not what we understand by causality. Anybody who claims that a thing can cause itself just doesn't understand how to use the word causality. In terms of the evolution of the species and so on, that comes from that, people say, oh well, look, there must be a cause because everything fits together so well. So this is now we're going to switch to the second part of the argument, just from general causality to the particular structure. Everything fits together so well, so that proves there must be a designer. Well, first of all, it's not clear that everything does fit together so well. I mean, has anyone tried to have a baby lately? Does anybody think that's a good design? I mean, I want to talk to them about design. Well, what about all sickness and illness and so on? And then people say, oh, well, we can answer that. Because you see, you don't actually know what the universe is here for. And so on the outside, it appears that it's badly designed because there's all sorts of sickness and illness. What it really is a giant obstacle course to find out whether you get to heaven. And as such, it serves its purpose very well. Well, I think there's a problem with that. First of all, why should children have to suffer and starve and be sick and ill and so on, so that I can decide whether I'm going to be magnanimous and get to heaven or not? Seems a bit unfair to use human beings in a giant obstacle. And secondly, of course, you could use that argument anyhow, that anything at all in the universe that was, or anything, any place that was everywhere, in any kind of shape at all, and you said, oh, it has no design, you could say, that's because you don't know what it's really for. But if you know what it's really for, you'll see it has a design. So if I don't start off with an end in mind, but I start off with a product, then I can find a function for it. And I can say, oh, it was designed with that function in mind, which is nonsense. You know, it's like we produce holograms. And that was a solution looking for a problem. So they ended up putting them on bank cards and so on. And it wasn't like people had to have these things. They had it, and then they desperately looked for something that it was a good design to build. But normally design goes the other way around. There's a function, you've got to try and hit a design target, and so on. And so you don't know what the target was to begin with, and so they can just change around and say, well, what it really is it's supposed to be doing that. Well, only if you believe the story. Why would I believe that story? I mean, what reason have I got to believe that story at all? Secondly, of course, even if, well, okay, the final thing is that you can argue that, is that the minute, Bell? 1 minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, another argument is that even if indeed we do agree that everything does fit together well, that doesn't show designer. If I'm a lousy photographer and I go out and I've used this example before, take photographs at random, and then I take all the bad photographs as no good and get rid of them, and I take all the good photographs and put them in my photographic book, makes it look as if I'm a good designer, a good photographer. If things are created evolutionarily random, by random mutation, and anything that doesn't fit together well just destroys itself because it's in the wrong environment, because it doesn't survive, then everything that does survive will necessarily be something that's in harmony with everything else, that fits together with everything else. And so if I come in halfway through the picture and I see everything in harmony, I say, oh, that shows that somebody designed it harmoniously. Not at all. What it shows is that there was a whole bunch of junk that was produced, and only that junk fitted with some of the other junk harmoniously survived, and therefore it gave the idea that there was an intelligent designer there at all. But there really wasn't. What there was no intelligence. It was just a rigorous selection process that only allowed that stuff that was harmonious to survive. So you don't need to postulate the intelligence. You can postulate the thing and explain it. Now, why wouldn't I want to postulate the intelligence? Something called Occam's razor. It's a general principle of human explanation and understanding that if we can explain something simply without proliferating concepts, we don't see any reason to do so. So if I can explain all of this in terms of things with which people are quite familiar, like the laws of nature and so on, why on earth would I want to make it more complex and introduce other levels of explanation? There's no reason to do so.
Maybe a couple more minutes too for the rude outburst. Thank you for handling that. Who has position number 2?
Number 2.
Okay.
Stand up.
I'll also give you a 1 minute then. That's probably a good idea.
Oh, morning?
A 1 minute thing, yeah.
Yeah.
I'll let you one down.
All right, ready? Creation versus evolution. First, let's define our terms. The theory of creation states that God created the heavens and the earth and all that they contain according to the biblical record. The theory of Darwinian evolution teaches that complex systems evolved out of simple systems by means of natural selection. The 3 columns of truth of evolution are as follows: succession, evolution, and Darwinianism, or Darwinism, I should say. Succession means that the earth rocks were laid down in order over a period of billions of years, 3 billion approximately, the oldest rocks being on the lowest level, and the most primitive fossils also being on the lowest level, and then they're layered upward. This is called the geologic column, and it's as basic to a geologist as the mathematic times tables are to a mathematician. This succession, which is called succession, is really an established geological fact. The primitive fossils, invertebrates, or even more primitive amoebas and worms and very low life sea life are in the lowest Cambrian layer way at the bottom. And as you move up the geologic column, you run into vertebrates and amphibians, and eventually the Jurassic level, which is the dinosaurs, and then on up through the primates and the mammals, and finally up to man on the tertiary level at the top. This is succession, and evolution is based on that column of levels called the geologic column. Also, evolution then goes further to state that the lowest levels have evolved upward into the secondary levels and up into the third levels and on up from the bottom all the way up. That's what evolution states. Then Darwin came along and said that is true, but it's done through mutation, which is random chance, and natural selection. That's the means by which evolution takes place. Now, what is wrong with that argument? First of all, if we look at the mutations, all of which evolution determines that all this happened through mutations. Mutation is actually an error in the copying of the genes. It isn't really that common, and by far the majority of mutations are negative and downward. They are not upward and better. Occasionally, rarely they are, but usually when they are, you'll find that there was a faulty mutation prior that this good mutation is now correcting. Now, there's one insurmountable problem with mutation being the foundation of evolution. Because while things do mutate, for example, bacteria mutate by the million within their species, no mutation goes outside its perimeter. They will mutate within a certain limited framework. Beyond that, they do not go. The grasses, for example, there's lots of mutated grasses. However, a grass does not mutate into a citrus tree. A bacteria does not mutate itself into being a cockroach. And so mutation is extremely limited. Then what about the fossil records? Now, this geological 1 mile deep column that we're talking about, it would be all very nice if you could ride an evolutionary ladder if you could ride an evolutionary elevator from the bottom and make a smooth trip up. However, if you wanted to go up this elevation, you'd have to go like a stair step, because the layers are laid down flat. There's like say the Cambrian level. There are millions of fossils that are quite similar, and they have dated all these levels. So for 1 million years, there's sort of a synchronicity to the fossil level. And then for about 100,000 years, there's basically nothing. Now, I know I'm oversimplifying, but I'm doing it just so we get the picture. There's basically little in between, and then there's another level, and this level is different from the lower level. It's quite distinct. And then 100,000 years, basically nothing. Then you reach another plateau, another level. And so you'd be going up a staircase if you wanted to go up this geologic column. And there's very little in between. So that's a problem as far as the fossil record is concerned, because an evolutionist says that one evolves into the other, and they work their way up. Now then, Simon brought the example again of the photograph album. That brings me to missing links. I believe the reason what he's trying to illustrate, I think, is natural selection here. What you see on the album are the 100 good photographs, and you don't see the 10,000 that were discarded. So you say, what a wonderful photographer. Exactly. Evolution, according to the theory of Darwinian evolution, you are seeing the finished product, the things that have mutated and upward. I want to know, where are the 100 million species on the way to perfection that were discarded? Show me the fossils for the intermediary species. They are sadly lacking. They are ridiculously lacking. I mean, this is an embarrassment to evolutionists. Do you know that the fossils that apparently illustrate the transition between ape and man, the sum total of those fossils would fit on a dining room table. And most of them are, even they're very small fragments that have been augmented, and they assume certain things of these fossils. In between, there is just almost nothing of a transitory species between the different species. There's just almost, the missing links are almost missing entirely. For example, the Cambrian layer, which has millions of sea urchins and snails and one-celled organisms. Below that, the pre-Cambrian layer, Cambrian layer, is blank. The only thing there are a few amoebas. So from which did the second layer draw? There's nothing down there to draw from. So there was nothing to supply it. I'll give you one example of a problem. Let's say a reptile is trying to turn itself into a mammal, which is part of the evolutionary teaching. All reptiles have 8 bones in their lower jaw, and they have 1 bone in each of their ears. All mammals, extinct and living, have 1 bone in their lower jaw and 3 bones in each middle ear. You know, they haven't found a single species of reptile that has reduced its jaw from 8 bones to 6 and increased its ear bones from 1 to 3, or anything, or any combination thereof. There's not one of this transitory state. So they're quite distinct beings, and you could multiply that by literally thousands of examples. The other problem with evolution is there's no master mind. Now let's take the human brain. I have to read these. There's 13 billion nerve cells make up the human brain. Each nerve cell has 1,000 billion molecules. Each molecule has an atom that oscillates 10 million times in 1 second. Get it? Now, supposing we gathered all the world's top scientists in the world's best lab, and we gave them an unlimited budget, and we said, create a human brain. They not only couldn't create the human brain. Now, this human brain has to think, taste, touch, smell, see, interpret, create fine music, understand language, have memory, have emotion, and the whole thing. They not only cannot create a brain, they've never succeeded in creating 1 living cell with all of their efforts, much less a living cell that will replicate itself. So if all these brains couldn't do it, do you think by random chance, random mutations, pure chance, and then through natural selection, that these things, these causative factors are going to get together and perform and create these brilliant, complex systems that we're surrounded with everywhere? It's basically preposterous to consider that. This is a quote from a famous geologist. To ascribe the development of the human brain and nervous system to blind chance is to suspend rational judgment and betray the cause of science. Then evolution is basically illogical. For example, a one-celled creature. People talk about primitive creatures. Okay, let's talk about primitive creatures. A one-celled creature, a bacteria, contains thousands of enzymes, which contain thousands of atoms, and these atoms are in a precise order. Now, a mathematician sat down and he figured the statistical chances of these atoms lining themselves up. We're only talking about one-celled bacteria. The chances of that happening are 1 to 1 with 20 zeros after it. Okay, if you multiply that statistics by all the cells and all living things, it just is obviously impossible. And then another problem is that everything would have had to evolve before it was needed. For example, why would a reptile, trying for some unknown reason to turn itself into a bird, way back over the eons of time, why would it start sprouting or developing buds for wings or feathers? How would it know? Who's directing its course to do that? Okay, I'm going to have to speed on here. I can't possibly cover this. The mathematical impossibilities. They have done statistics. Mathematicians have sat down on this. And they have said Darwinism is mathematically impossible. It requires an endless succession of mathematical miracles. And this is a quote from some of their, all the quotes in here are from evolutionists, most of which are atheists, and they're top men in their fields or women in their fields. They are the top of the heap. So all the quotes, I don't give you the name, I don't have time for all the background. I'm just going to say quote. Okay, quote. The length of time life has been on the earth, which is 4.5 billion years, is not nearly long enough for all the chance mutations and natural selection to occur to produce all the billions of possibilities and combinations of genes. Okay, let's skip all that. Now we come to creation. Can creationists reconcile science with the theory of creation? Yes, but I'll be the first to admit Well, I guess I won't admit it.
Can you make it quickly? 5, 10, 15
Yes,
seconds?
I think 1 minute? Okay. I'll just.
Go on, I'll give you
Yeah,
one of my minutes.
I'll just.
No, you can have one of my minutes.
One of his minutes, let's see.
The panel votes.
Creationists are not all in total agreement, and neither are evolutionists. However, all creationists say this: God created the heaven and the earth according to the Bible, but they interpret it slightly differently. And I have my own view on that, but which I think reconciles with all of science. I mean, I'll just say this: I believe that the days of Genesis 1 are geological time frames. I believe in the Big Bang Theory, which took place 10 billion years ago. The Earth cooled and formed probably 4.5 billion years. And then I think the geological ages are God when he intercepted Genesis and he created these different days, developed different things. And it's interesting that the days, the geologic days, to some degree correspond with the geological column. In other words, when he created plant life, now we have plant fossils near the bottom. Then he created the sea life, and of course that's down lower. And then on the fifth day he created mammals on the earth, and that comes up higher. And of course, last of all, he created man. So to some degree, there is a parallel between these two.
Perfect time. Just reaching for it. We let our last panelist have a question answer. Can we let our last
Yeah, we're going to hear
panelist?
all the speakers, and then we're going to respond.
Exactly. If we could, that'd be great.
If you can remember it, otherwise I'll give you
Oh,
part of
I
that.
can pick and choose.
Steve, kick him out.
All right.
Mr. Butler.
Well, there's a lot to comment on, isn't it? The DNA is the blueprint for organic life. Every organism has a DNA. And what is the DNA? Well, the DNA is a series of molecules that spiral around in a double helix, and depending upon which atoms go to make up which molecules in the DNA, it determines what animal you're talking about. Now, scientists have been able now with electron microscopes to look at the atomic structures of the molecules in the atom, to look at the atomic structures of the molecules that stack in the double helix crystal DNA. Now, what if you look at a DNA of a tadpole? Well, it looks like this. You don't need to know the details, but you can look at it, you can plot it out, and you can describe it with numbers of molecules, numbers of atoms, and configuration and relationships of atoms and molecules. And it's sort of like a blueprint. Now, if you go to a dog, the first part of the dog's DNA looks exactly like a tadpole. Then it goes on out here because it's more complicated. Dogs have a little bit more going for them than tadpoles. And then if you go to an orangutan or an ape, you see exactly the same atomic structure that a one-celled amoeba has. That's the first life form. I mean, it's the simplest, one cell. So even a dog has the first part of it looks just like the alga or the amoeba. Alga also grows as a one-cell animal. If you look at the ape, looks just like the alga, looks just like the tadpole, looks just like the dog, but out here, it's different. Then if you get up to man, it looks exactly like an ape, all the way out this far, and about that much on the end of the DNA of a man or a woman looks slightly different from an ape. But 99.9% of the atomic structure, the blueprint of what this thing is identical. Except for these few atoms out here on the end. The ape doesn't have them, man's got them. Excuse me?
2% difference in the genes.
2%, okay. Okay. So what does that tell us? I mean, it doesn't tell us that God didn't create man. It doesn't tell us anything like that. It just tells us that there is a startling atomic similarity between us and all life. That it is literally a logical, rational, sequential, atomic sequencing that's identical with all life until you get out to the very few last atoms, and then we're different from an ape, and the dog is different from the cat, only by a few atoms in the DNA. Now, what can we conclude from such a thing? Well, obviously, whoever made the amoeba made man. Same idea, same atomic, crystalline, molecular, double helix, all that's identical. So whoever created all this stuff, and it wasn't one thing creating the earth and a different thing creating man. And man is really no different from the ape, except for a few atoms. And of course there are other differences. Man kills without a reason, shits in his own nest, destroys his own environment. So there are other differences between man and apes, other than the DNA. The ape not only does not kill other apes, it doesn't even kill other animals that come in and eat its food. Man kills animals that just are coming to eat its food. He destroys habitats for whole species and just wipes them out, thinks nothing of it, goes on, destroys another habitat, destroys another species. He will shoot a person if he comes on his property in most parts of the world. So what is the difference between man and the ape? The biggest difference is that man thinks he knows something. He thinks he's God or godlike or made by God to rule over the earth. The ape has no clue that he was created to rule over the earth. He's just over there living peacefully in the rainforest, up away from all other, animals that could harm him or cause trouble, until man reached the rainforest. Now man's killing the ape. Well, I can't tell you whether God created everything using evolution as the vehicle to create it all, or whether it just happened, as Simon will tell us, that it just happened. God didn't have anything to do with it. But I can tell you that man's arrogance, thinking that he knows who created everything, and thinking that he was put here first to rule over all women, that's in the Bible. That's in our culture. It's called male hierarchical power structure. The Bible was created by men to create a male hierarchical power structure. And since that structure exists today, the Judeo-Christian conspiracy rules the world with atomic weapons in a male hierarchical power structure. Now, I don't have any objection to this, except that they're destroying the world. And I live here. So, I think that there's something wrong with male hierarchical power structure. I think there's something wrong with people that think that God gave them the right to decide who lives and who dies, and to just wantonly go around destroying habitats and killing things. And so the people that talk about God, to me, are the most dangerous people of all. Because it's that notion that we know something about God that has made us so dangerous to ourselves and to other animals. So we can't decide whether God created all this or not. But I would just say this. If God did create man and told man to rule over the world, God's fucked up. And if all of that's true, all that whole story, I don't want anything to do with it. It doesn't interest me because it's destroying the world. That's all I have to say.
1 minute bell, for the latecomers, a few of you strolled in. The topic's creation versus evolution. Next week it's apocalypse in the year 2000. Remind everybody, please support the Wormhole and buy a little something. And as far as question and answers, you were the original hands.
Oh, well.
And if we can, please direct it to one or more members of the panel. That's always helpful.
Well, it's such a spectrum to choose from.
Or the whole panel, whatever, but it's
Well,
easier
really?
if they know.
Well, I could take exception to something of what everyone has said.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It started out.
That's quite
It
right. The question of male hierarchical society really, I don't see how it really plays back onto evolution or creationism.
Evolution
but I
is a
think
theory
that-
of a man
yeah,
who
yeah.
was in
I
part of the
understand that.
hierarchy.
Yeah, but I think the person who wrote the Book of J would take exception to your belief that the Bible was entirely created by men. I haven't read the
Wrote
Book
the
of J.
book of what?
Book of J came out a couple of years ago, and the author's premise was that certain passages in the Bible, if drawn back, and we're talking now about Old Testament, if drawn back to the original source, there are several sources that they believe they can identify. Okay, going back into the text, the early texts that were translated, and one of those sources is referred to as J. It has to do with how the concept of God, more to the point, the name of God is expressed. Well, this particular author believed that the person who wrote the Book of J, wrote those passages identified as being by the author called J, from the way that they express God, was a female, was a woman. Okay, and the Book of J presents she basically did. She was all those passages, put them together, and kind of tried to explain them from a more feminist viewpoint. Anyway, so there's a question as to whether the dichotomy, I suppose, of female versus male is really as strong as you would suggest in the Bible. But that's really off the subject. Now, with regard to the question of things having to do with the geologic column and mutations and such as that, the issue, well, where do I start? Okay, there's a concept called industrial melanism. And that's very, very straightforward. What it says is that, what it basically goes down to is that there is variation within species. For instance, my friend Evan here, he's hairy. I mean, he is. Okay, I am not particularly hairy. I mean, if you opened up his shirt, you'd find he had a hairy chest. Well, if you open up mine, you'd find a couple of sprigs, and that's about it. We're talking about variation within a species. Now, if there was a particular reason why, because Evan was hairy, that he might live longer, then that would mean that he'd be selected for hairiness. Okay, now, getting back to industrial melanism. Okay, industrial melanism has to do with something that was noted in England. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, okay, for whatever reasons, it produced pollution. And as a result of pollution, certain trees and various things, structures, were darker. For instance, a tree was sooty colored. And as a result, certain moths, which are quite tasty, certain predators, birds and such as that, were selected for in their color. In the sense that a gray moth against a gray tree, the gray tree having the soot on it, and therefore it matched better than another moth, which was brown. Now, originally, the brown moth was selected for because the tree was brown. But after the industrial pollution occurred, the tree was now gray, and the gray moth was selected. We're not talking about mutation so much as we're talking about selection within a population. As the example of Evan being more prone to be, even though Carrie, being more prone to be selected for versus people who aren't so hairy. In this case, it's a gray moth versus a brown moth. Now, as far as
What does all that mean?
Yeah, is this coming around to
well,
a question
we're talking about. She brought up the subject of mutation. Okay, and what I'm talking about is not so much mutation as the spectrum of variations within a specific species.
But you're not crossing species lines. You're talking about adaptation.
No, you
Certain
were
things
talking
will
about
adapt.
mutation at the time, and I was speaking
Right.
only to the issue of mutation. If you want to get into the question of the geologic column, you brought up the subject of why aren't certain things preserved, for instance, or why are there gaps in the column? Okay.
Why isn't the continuity?
Right, exactly, continuity. Well, an example. Which do you think would be more likely to be preserved, a jellyfish or a fish? Now, a fish has bones in it, okay? Bones are hard body parts, okay? They tend to be preserved, okay? A jellyfish doesn't have any hard body parts. As an example, a shark. It has hard body parts. It has teeth, okay? They are preserved because they are hard, okay? But a jellyfish, being that it has no hard body parts, doesn't tend to be preserved. The conditions necessary for preservation of a soft-bodied creature are very, very specific and very, very rare. It does happen.
So what you're saying is that would explain why there isn't a gradation within
Exactly,
the...
one of the reasons
But
why.
there's another explanation, which
Yes.
is, I mean, that may be part of the explanation.
Yeah.
But there's another explanation, which is my feeling, would actually explain it better, and that is this. If you look at carbon, coal is carbon, diamonds are carbon, and I'm 80% carbon. They take on very different physical forms, yet chemically they're very similar. What Lee was saying was that if you actually look at the genetic structure of various creatures, the genetic structure is very close together, although the actual creature itself may look very different, because the way that the creature evolves is about the relationship between the genetic structure and the environment. And so therefore what you might well expect is that if you look at the genetic structure, you've precisely got this graduated, steady, regular hierarchy where there are big gaps. It's just that if you're using the wrong way of looking, if you're looking at the wrong level, if you're looking at the gross physical features of the creatures, yes, indeed, there are big gaps.
Now, wait a minute.
But the
Hang
evolution,
on.
the evolutionary theory
No.
states that it's not the
You're saying that the-
let me just
no.
finish. It's saying that it's not the gross physical features of the creature that are mutated and evolved. The evolutionary theory says it's the DNA and RNA that's mutated, and indeed, in that mutation, you have no great big
Show the
gaps.
fossil record of this preserved DNA that is in transition.
You don't need no.
You don't have
need it
fossil
in
records of
transition.
DNA.
Well, of course you don't.
transition.
That's my point exactly.
But what you
So
don't-
what's he basing this
No, no,
ridiculous
no,
notion on?
no.
That there's DNA is evolving, and of course we have no record of it
I
whatsoever.
don't need it.
But there's no external
I don't
record.
need
There's
it.
no.
Look.
If you have DNA, it will
Okay.
Let me
dictate what
explain-
you
can
turn
I just-
into on the outside.
Can I just explain the structure of the argument? The structure of the argument said that one of the arguments was that one of the reasons why evolution can't be right is because if there was indeed evolution, there would be continuity from one species to another species to another species. But when you look at the fossil record, you see what appears to be great big gaps. What I am saying is that if you look at, forget the fossil record, if you look at ordinary living animals nowadays, there appears to be, between one creature and another, often a great big gap. A tadpole and a dog, for example. Yet, I don't like that particular example, but one might use other examples. But when one looks at the DNA, there is indeed continuity. So what makes you think that when you look at the gross physical features of creatures in the fossil record, where there appear to be on their gross physical features great big gaps, that this is indicative of a lack of continuity in the evolution of their DNA? There's no reason to believe that at all. We know that DNA that shows continuity manifests itself in physical forms, which, in
Yes,
gross
that's
physical
right.
features which show no continuity
Right,
and great
it
big gaps.
does manifest
So
itself
we're not at all surprised that there are great big gaps in the fossil
I don't
record.
follow that, because what is being preserved are the physical features. The DNA dictates what it'll turn into. In other words, the DNA of a dog produces a dog. When that dies and becomes part of the fossil record, we have the fossil of a dog. Okay, there are no intermediary species halfway between the different species.
But there's
I
intermediary
think I can
Question.
question this. I'm a programmer by trade. Okay. One of the things that we've been talking about here has been focusing on the DNA and how there's been a change, slight changes in DNA that cause radical changes in physical structure. Okay, there's something called robustness of code in programming. Basically, it means that probably 95% of your word processor is 95% of the same game that you play when you plug it into your Sega. It's called reusable code. Okay, all you basically do is make minor changes. Now, this is the only reason I bring this up is because it's been explored recently in genetics, where they discovered recently the genetic ability to either cause feet or fins. Okay, and I don't know if you read about it. There's a small article in time about a large article in Scientific America and a really, really long article in Trade magazine that somebody sent me over the internet. Basically, what happened is that they simply isolated a gene where they made a minor change. Okay, and they discovered they could put as many toes as they wanted on a mouse. Okay, and they isolated the same gene within a lionfish and made it have, and they basically toggled it the other way, and it all of a sudden had, instead of fins, it had flippers.
Right. I'm aware of that.
So
we're talking about natural
selection. No. What I'm pointing at is that very, very, very minor changes cause radical changes in the gross and anatomical structure of an animal. Okay. Therefore, you can have punctuated. The term for this is punctuated evolution.
Right.
Okay.
You say that.
No,
I mean,
no.
what you're talking about the future, but the fact remains.
No, I'm not talking
what's
about the future.
behind-
No, I'm not talking about the future. I'm talking about you're talking about mutations. Okay. Now you're saying that mutations are a very rare thing. Okay. And mutations, grant you, are a very rare thing. Okay. But on a time scale of 4 billion years.
It's not
Well,
nearly
that's
enough.
not,
Okay.
that's
No.
another
Okay.
issue.
Listen.
That's
Okay.
another issue. Can I just address that issue?
I just want to make one
Well-
quick point. I won't take up much time. There's a lot of
I trust you.
I didn't use anywhere near my time.
Yeah, I know. I trust you.
I'm not into, garbage. I'm into precision. There's a lot of evidence and a lot of books have been written that there have been aliens here from other places. What makes us think they didn't know how to change genes? What makes us think they didn't crossbreed us with whatever? What makes us think everything happened here? This is not the center of the universe. Okay.
That's one possible solution, which is, of course, not at all mystical and has no God. The other possible solution is there's several. One is that the rate of evolutionary change was far greater earlier because before the atmosphere and the ultraviolet filters and so on, there was far more radiation. Radiation causes a lot of genetic change, and we have evidence that there were high levels of radiation in the early years. The other thing, of course, is that if you've got billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of planets, anyone who knows anything about statistical theory, for example, knows that the rate at which electrons are emitted, individual electrons are emitted from a radioactive source, is very random. So you get very uneven, very random rates of emission, even more so. Now, if there are clusters, there are clusterings where many are emitted. And if you look for over billions and billions and billions, you'll find clusterings. If there are billions and billions and billions of planets, which there are, what makes us think that the rate of evolution on some planets just is not statistically higher than the average rate? That for just simply, for reasons of probability, there will be some places in which, improbable as it might appear to be, there will be a more rapid rate of mutation than statistically one would expect, just because in some planets there will be, say for example there are 10 mutation possibilities and within a period of time, and the average number of mutations on some planet, all the planets across the universe, is 3 mutations in that 10. What makes us think that there won't be some planets in which there will be no mutations? And other planets in which there will be 10 mutations. So if Earth happens to be one of those where there is a high uptake of the mutation probability, then Earth ends up having far more mutations than you would expect, just because statistically, if some have a lower number, others will end up having a higher.
Where are they?
Where are they?
Well, I explained the missing links. The missing links was another issue. The fossil record is there. What you're saying is that there are gaps in the fossil record. This is another issue. You're saying there are gaps in the fossil record because the gross physical features show great big gaps. I'm saying the gross physical features show great big gaps, but the DNA shows continuity. What I'm further saying is your second argument, which is different from that. It's a totally different independent argument, is if there have got to do all these mutations over a short period of time, how come it's possible? And I produced two arguments, both of which show that it might be possible. First of all, that the rate of mutation was greater when there was less atmospheric cover and there was more radiation, and maybe other elements that we don't know, that we're not aware of. And secondly, that in some cases, I mean, sometimes, you know, you can, if on average everybody crossed that road 5 times before they were knocked over, there'd be some days on which far more people would be knocked over than on other days because you just happen to have been unlucky that way. Maybe in terms of that same kind of notion of probability, I can't make it more simple than that. The Earth is just one of the places. The evolution didn't have to happen here, but as a matter of fact, it did happen here. It may have happened nowhere else. But you know, we didn't start off and say evolution's got to happen on Earth. Isn't it amazing that it happened on Earth? It could have happened anywhere. But as a matter of fact, we were just one of those unlucky planets, if you like, or lucky, depending on how you look at it, where virtually everything that could possibly produce a mutation did. Because on other planets, things that could produce mutations didn't. And that's just about statistical probability. And as for how many have got to line up in order to produce us and so on, why do we think that there was some plan that we were going that the system was going to evolve human beings? If you start at the end point and say, yes, what Simon is trying to explain is how random mutation could produce people, as if somebody had people in mind, and these random mutations strangely produce people, that would be very odd indeed. But my whole theory says nobody has anything in mind. This is just one of the billions of ways in which the evolution could have happened, and as a matter of fact, it ended up with people.
I'm going to leave, so I just want to make my point again. It's so arrogant to think that there's never been people from other places here, and that they didn't actually bring the knowledge that we're pretending to be gods with. I think they brought it, they gave it to us, and somebody used it to rule the world, and they're still doing it. And I mean, I could repeat this in a lot of other ways, but it doesn't do any good. If you want to know the truth, you'll keep looking. Okay.
Thank you. Right.
Go ahead.
The whole concept, I don't think UFOs have anything to do with American governments or Russian governments or anything like that, because all the proposed behavior behind unidentified flying objects going Mach 4 in one direction and then instantaneously going at a right angle in another direction is physically impossible for us now, and possibly for the next 1,000 years as far as our technology is concerned. So it's not us. Also, if it's another race or planet or whatever, federation of planets or whatever you like to think, if they have the technology to go Mach 4 and then to totally go against our physical laws and make a right turn, then they should have the technology to be completely invisible, to not let us see them. Either they want it to go undetected, or they want to make contact. So why we see little lights flying by in the sky? Why are there crop circles? Why are there thousands of people running around saying that they've had an alien's child? It's ridiculous.
We've so many questions going on here. I believe you were next in the back.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to ease up this tension. There seems to be a false dichotomy being made between science and religion. I respect your arguments. I think they're very well done, except you're not referring to Isaac Newton, who was himself a theologian. I think what you're referring to is the ignorance of Rome at that time. I mean, you can't just build a wall between religion and science. I mean, after all.
Isaac Newton was a theologian?
He wrote theological works, absolutely.
Was he a theologian?
Absolutely, sure.
Like, what sort of theologian? What sort of theological work?
Well, I don't know the name of the theological works they were referred to by contemporaries and Puritans and so on. But it's immaterial. I'm not prepared with the name of his works any more than I know.
But there's no dichotomy between science and religion.
What I'm saying is you can deal either with science, you're saying with explanation, or the science is wrong with religion. It doesn't disintegrate anything that has to do with religion. I mean,
Sure it does.
gravity. It doesn't mean that God's not in control of
No,
gravity.
sure it does. Look, come on, the history of religion, as a matter of fact, is that religions have constantly tried to take the credit of explaining everything that otherwise could not be explained. And that's why they, it's a franchise dispute. They want to do the other guys out of the gig. So anybody who claims not to be Christian,
Well, look at this out.
well, hang on, wait a minute, hang on. Anybody who claims not to be Christian and gives an explanation is demonic. In fact, they tried to demonize science. You remember Galileo, who got thrown the instruments of torture because he had the temerity to say that maybe the Earth didn't, not everything revolved around the Earth, right? I mean, that was an early, one of the blunders of religion where they got it wrong. Religion constantly, if you'd been sitting here 300 years ago, we wouldn't have not have heard that anything that couldn't be explained by science and wasn't explained by religion was demonic. We'd have heard that anything that couldn't be explained by religion was demonic, period. But because science had met with some limited success, grudgingly and lately, religion had to jump on the bandwagon and had to accept scientific explanation. Because religion always claimed to explain everything. The Christian religion it claims to explain the origin of the universe, the physical, the structure of human beings who are created by God. They use religions, not the Christian religion, but religions used to claim to explain why the planets were and the stars moved around the heavens. They claim to explain the seasons, and so on. And as science progressed and explained more and more, it gave an alternative explanation, which people found more simple and coherent, and all the other things that we accepted as a theory. And it did it out of the gig.
Does science exclude God? How can that exclude God?
Not necessarily.
Yeah, right. That's not saying it can't exclude God.
I've got a question here for Grace. You say the paranormal activity is mainly demonic.
A lot of it, I believe.
Well, that means Christ was a Satanist if he can heal people. I'm sure that's demonic. So that means that Christ was a Satanist.
No, that would be category 3. I would call that divine intervention. There's a difference between the divine and the demonic, or like that. So he healed people through divine power.
But that's the whole point, is that the categories are very relative to your own particular point of view.
Yes.
They are relative only because they change in time. Because if science can drop them, if science can prove or explain something that ceases to be satanic, what was once a satanic turns out to be mystical later on. The mystics of Juana Inés de la Cruz, if you are familiar with her, she was considered a mystic before her, many were burned at the stake. Finally, they accepted the mystics, that yes, you could have mystical experience. Then that was considered divine. The whole notion that your categories are relative proves that there really are not truth is relative. Your explanations are constantly shifting.
No, I don't think so. I believe truth is absolute. But I make the Bible absolute truth. So I use that as the international standard by which I judge it. For instance, if an apparition appeared here, I would judge that on the basis of what I've learned here. I wouldn't judge it from my experience. If I had, for example, I had a near-death experience, and I was entered into some realm of light and saw a being of light, I wouldn't, and this being of light told me to go to the world and preach peace to mankind. I wouldn't come back based on my experience, because that experience must square with the Word of God, the international standard of truth.
But look,
So I would have to query that. Is this a true angel of God that appeared, or was it an impersonating demon spirit disguised as an angel of light, having his own agenda? Because I believe they readily deceive people. I think they have more trouble deceiving me because I think I'm more on to them. I think a lot of people don't know everything extraterrestrial they think is angelic and divine. So we have people contacting your guardian angel. What are they going to get? They're going to get a familiar spirit, a impersonating spirit that will give himself a name. My name is Moo. My name is the Virgin Mary, whatever. And that angel impersonating a demon will give them all the lies they want to hear. I mean, I'm not talking theory, I'm talking actual. I had some actual experiences. I've had all kinds of people tell me, first-person accounts. I mean, I know wherever I speak. I know demons are real, and I know they can be challenged and made to identify themselves. And I know they can be exorcised.
How can you be sure that Christ wasn't to Satan?
Excuse me, the lady in white has been extraordinarily patient.
Well, I kind of remember what I was thinking now.
Sorry,
the thing that disturbs me most of all is when I hear somebody say, I mean, I'm very familiar with the truth, Pravda, or, you know, and there's no truth in Pravda.
I don't know what problem it is.
That's the Soviet newspaper.
Oh, I know.
Pravda means truth,
Yeah.
the truth, the truth. I think that your approach is very offensive to, I mean, other people who. This is a question I asked my mother when I was 5 years old. Mom, I mean, what if the people in Africa never heard about God or Jesus or any other part of the world? Does that mean they're condemned to hell? That's what I hear from most of the Christians that I talk to. Yes, they are. And he suggested here that that the wars that were not perpetrated in the name of religion, as Simon suggested, but were perpetrated for expansionism and political things. The very fact that, in my opinion, that a person would sit and promote their religious thought from the Bible is already, to me, an expansionist idea to that once magnified and spread out produces the rest of the expansionism that went on in these wars. I mean, to me, your relationship with whatever or whomever is incredibly personal, and once you start to push it out, it is already the beginning of expansionism.
Well,
Yeah, well, yes, pretty much. Yeah.
you're talking about truth. Jesus said, it's either yay or nay. Jesus said, with very dogmatic, didactic statement, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Talk about dogmatic. Talk about one way. Then he said to his disciples, go ye into all the world and preach this gospel.
But he wasn't expansion.
Maybe Jesus was wrong. Maybe he wasn't expansion. It was the historical truth of Jesus. If it was a historical truth of Jesus, which is how to argue that it's expansion, it seems to my probably wrong. Jesus was wrong. Why should you listen to him?
But you see, it still goes back to the fact that everybody that lived before Jesus went to hell.
No, it was set up for that. No, I mean, you want to know that. That's
a
not,
theological debate.
that's a theological, I mean, there's an answer for that, but I don't know whether we want to answer it
Well,
under this
I
topic.
mean, I'm definitely ill-equipped for this, but it seems to me that the whole concept that's going on is, from the beginning, expansionist, and he's expansionist.
Right.
But then why don't we, I mean, there's a point there, this is this. So how do you use the perfect Jesus? I believe it's possible. I believe it's possible. I believe that he claimed lots of things, some of which I think are probably fairly about me. And if he said I was the truth, the way, and the life, then I believe he was wrong. Now, where does that leave it? You tell me you believe he was right, I say I believe he was wrong. Does that mean then that their claim that our positions are relative is incorrect? What makes your belief that he was right more absolute or less relative? I believe that he was wrong. How do you justify your belief as absolute that what he said was correct and that and so on, and say that people who don't accept that, either because they're atheists or because they accept other religions and don't accept this one, how can you say that they're wrong? I mean, you know, is anxiety projected. I mean, read Freud on conscience. When people feel anxiety, when people, you do it with children. You threaten to withdraw love and attention and affection. The child feels anxiety. Oh, you're a bad boy or a bad girl. Or, oh, you're good. The child feels anxiety. That's the onset of what most people refer to as conscience. My father used to refer to as conscience. He said, I know when I'm doing something wrong, I get a prickly sensation in the back of my neck. I said, but what that is high blood pressure and increased physiology because you're feeling anxiety. The purpose of morality is to manipulate, of religious morality, or in fact any form, any codified system of morals, is an attempt to manipulate the anxiety of lack of attention, lack of affection, that somebody's not going to feed you, that somebody's not going to care for you. To manipulate anxiety and the opposite, the feeling of well-being, in such a way as to get people to conform to the ways of behaviour that those who are in a position to manipulate that anxiety feel is best for them or for the society or for the tribe. Hence we get things like the commandments and stuff. So when we have unusual phenomena, it has the potential of providing anxiety. And therefore, linked with that is the question of morality. And people automatically link anything that's potentially anxiety producing, they make a moral issue. Because morality, of course, is nothing at all except for the manipulation of anxiety by those who wish to manipulate it in a particular way, in a codified way, in order to control people's behaviour.
You've been waiting for quite a while, and then the two gentlemen in the back.
I've got two questions. One for Simon and one for Grace, actually. And the one for Simon is, you say that these alien spaceships don't exist, or whatever they are. Well, there are 20 people, or something like that, there are hundreds of people like so. There are 20 videotapes of the UFO flying over the sky just before the eclipse and hovering somewhere. Now that would be enough for any jury in a court case. If you show that to a jury, if you show 20.
Why would I? Well, first of all, I don't say the thing.
Simon, can I carry on? There's someone in England convicted for murdering a child who's caught on one videotape, and which was blurred, and we've got these perfect ones. And then you get incidents where there's been members of the police, members of the CIA, members of the FBI, and so forth testifying, and you still say that these things aren't real.
I never denied it was an unidentified flying object. All I said was that it wasn't immediately apparent to me that unidentified flying objects came from extraterrestrial sources. On the other hand, I never denied that they did. I said it's possible. In fact, I said it's probably quite probable because there's quite lots of other planets. So you've got the wrong person here. I never denied that they existed, nor did I deny that they could, in principle, come from other planets. I would accept if I saw the evidence and I saw a lot. I'd say, look, there's lots of flying objects. I can't identify where they come from. We've agreed we've got UFOs. They come. I'm sure there are lots of UFOs. The real question is whether they come from extraterrestrial. I don't know.
You had a quick question for Grace while that responds to it.
You said that Christ was either a lunatic or the Son of God. But there have been plenty of people claimed to be completely so how do you... They did that with a bunch of people in Mexico. What were they doing? Anyway, they were just Christians. No one leaves that in the music. They leave them as this dreaded cult, but they're Christians. And the FBI just came and blew them up. Christ was like that kind of cult. He got all these happy fishermen that were just staring out in their fishing villages with their wives and stuff. And he told them to drop all their tools, leave their wives and families and come and follow him. And personally, I think he's worse than that clock I've always recognized. Because that clock is basically the opposite
Pardon me?
This guy.
Oh, am I out of, I'm sorry, I have the order wrong. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, basically, there's been one tendency that has been pretty common in this entire conversation from both sides among the audience is that, great, as you put it, miraculous things. Okay, basically, you said miraculous things either come from God or from Satan. Right? All these miraculous things. Okay. Now, what defines miraculous things? Okay. And then all the other things are explainable in science. Okay, what defines miraculous things? Okay. You can go down and say all these things as we explain them, come up, and they get this great big area of science. Okay. But that is to imply that science in and of itself, okay, is that which has been explained. And that which has not been explained is not in the realm of science. Okay. So, but science is the overall basic theories of observation. Okay, so how are you, everything that is observed basically fits into the category of science. This is something that we have seen, this is something that we observe, this is a phenomenon. Okay, and phenomena being observed, then you try to fit theories into it. Okay, how is the theories that you have of the God and the devil any more superior than any of the other theories that have been raised about UFOs? Like, for instance, you at one point, I believe, you were talking about how UFOs, might be demonic phenomena, or they might be godly phenomena, they might be angels or whatever. I remember hearing you say, they could be demonic phenomena. And, there is a scientific theory that, it's not a scientific theory, it's a theory that has yet to be disproven. This is their extraterrestrial craft. Okay. Both these theories, without further observation, without actual concrete proof of one or the other, are equally true. What is it that you think that these are demonic or from God?
I don't think I ever said they're from God because I never thought they're from God. I would say that there's probably an extremely slim chance that UFOs could be scientifically explained. But if I had to make a choice now, I'd say they're of the devil and they're demonic. The reason I say that is the people that have chased after them, in fact, there's religions that are based on ufology, but people that have pursued it and that have contacted aliens and that have received messages, it's textbook. I mean, those messages to me are so familiar. The same old lie from the pit, perpetrating the same errors, trying to entice people away from the truth. And the fear that comes upon these people is typical, because these beings are fearful. They can impersonate all kinds of different looks. They can they can appear in the physical realm, and they can disappear in the physical realm. Even the breeding of children, I believe that's old stuff too. I believe that was back in Genesis when the sons of God mated with the daughters of man and created as sort of an alien race for a time until it was wiped out in the flood. So much of what they do and say is familiar. denominator is, for the people that have had these experiences, at some point in their life, they have probably opened themselves to demonic activity. They might have been with psychics, they might have pursued something that they didn't realize they were opening a door to this activity in their life.
Very, 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 very true. You're saying that because this phenomenon, because this observation, because this, factual people say that they have seen, people are saying that they've seen, because this activity, this UFOs, these unexplained lights in the skies, have led to what you describe as demonic behavior. Okay, then the actual lights in the sky, the actual act of observing the lights in the sky, the lights in the sky basically are demonic. That's what you're saying, because they cause a demonic reaction. That all these people raise up, in these cults as this. What do you describe it? Doesn't want to. Ufology. I've never heard that.
So anybody, this means that anybody in an aeroplane who's
Yes,
like
so
they can't explain it.
Well, then you
become
turn
a
around.
demon.
No, I think any of it.
Then you turn around and you look at what has led to more cults, what has led to more things in the Western world. You take a look at the story of Jesus Christ. Okay, this gave rise to many, many different cults. This gave rise to many, exactly what you determined as false Christians. As basically you said that these were not the actual true Christians. They're operating, saying that they're operating this Jesus Christ, this image. That is something that's been observed and something that's been written about just as equally.
Because Satan's main activity is in the area of religion, not in the area of UFOs.
So how are you saying that these UFOs are demonic activities because they're causing rise to all these demonic cults?
That is not.
When Jesus Christ, the idea, the story of Jesus Christ, has given rise to all these demonic cults as well. Wouldn't then Jesus Christ be a demonic act?
No.
Or the story of Jesus Christ?
No, it's just
The
that.
recording?
No, but Satan centers his activity in the area of religion. I mean, I believe the gospel is clear.
Is there anything more religious than Jesus Christ?
The pure essence of Christ and his teaching is the gospel. And that's why, what the verse I read in Acts, how Paul rebuked somebody who was right there, right at the time, who was trying to mislead and confuse and muddy the water. That Satan has been active from the beginning. Certainly his main activity area is in the area of religion, not in UFOs, and not in crop circles, and not in magic. Those are sidelines. But he has a tremendous plethora of activities. The goal is always the same, though, to lead and entice man away from the simple fact that Christ died for our sins, and we can have our sins forgiven and be brought into fellowship with God, to bring us back to God. And there's all this tremendous amount of confusion around that issue.
I can't help but see this as a struggle for monopoly. Anything
Oh,
that
absolutely.
anything that we can't explain has got to be demonic.
No, I just.
We got the gentleman in the back who's been waiting a while, and then half the member of our panel and myself also have to go home very briefly. So if you want to try to get one in real quick, if we can briefly wrap it up.
I wanted to make the suggestion of a question more or less along the lines of conspiracy theory in regard to race, phrasing it different than I would with science. If these are physical acts or physical manifestations, would you have any belief in the idea that the government is hiding the physical act of these manifestations and why? And Simon, basing on if these are actual physical acts that are true, would you believe that the government is covering up these experiences from the general public? So why?
Are you asking me first or Grace first? Either way.
I doubt it. I doubt it. If the government, suddenly revealed that all of this has been a government cover-up and all that, well, I'd have to take another look at it. I'd still wonder, about the alien encounters and the messages that are coming back, and all of that good stuff would be highly questionable. But I personally don't think the government has anything to do with any of it.
I think the interesting question is if it turned out to be governmental, would you then say it ceased being demonic? Because your structure of explanation is that if you can explain it by any other means, if you can't explain it by any other means than science, then it's demonic. Now, does the government count as science, and therefore, if it's governmental, it's not demonic? Or is it actually that we really are living under the power of the great Satan, as the Ayatollah would claim, and that if it was governmental, that would make it demonic? But sorry, I'm just saying.
I'm with you. I'm working with government. They can't get their act together.
I mean, you know, I don't know whether it's a government conspiracy or whether it's a government secret. You see, the thing about government secrets is if they're really secret, they're secret, and you don't know. And so the extent. I think one of to lump all this UFO phenomena all together is already absurd. I mean, there are all sorts of different ones with all sorts of different statuses. There are claims by clear bunches of lunatics. There are clear claims by people who've been taking hallucinogenic drugs, for God's sake. And then there are claims by, airline pilots, and there are claims by people who are tired. There are claims by all sorts of people make these claims. And some of the claims seem to fall into certain patterns, and seems to be a recurrence. Actually, the ones who've taken the drugs seem to be the most consistent claims. The airline pilots make all kinds of inconsistent. But, to lump them all together as if they're all the same, and that if one was wrong, then they're all wrong, or if one was right, they're all right. And is the government activity about which we do not know? Probably. Are the government? Yes, the U-2 spy plane. Nobody knew about it until somebody shot one. At least the Russians knew about it until someone shot them. Do we think that they do high-flying missions and we see things that we don't identify? Probably. Does that surprise me? No. Am I paranoid about it? Do I think that makes them the evil empire? No. I think they're all different phenomena on all kinds of different levels. And why anybody thinks that any of this has got anything to do with God or religion or Satan is completely beyond me.
Closing question here, closing answer.
Well, just, I don't know if you're, this is just a comment at the end. My connection with the Air Force intelligence tells me that the government does have a completely written packet on how to deal with alien approaching or coming to the Earth. They already have it written.
They do it. It's also white sections are available to the public. But then again, they plan for just about any contingency.
Right. There are contingency plans for alien.
Clark was just recently in the U.S. Again, helping them rewrite what would happen to the major leaders.
I'd say they keep going sandwiches. Be very nice to them and hope that they don't.
I am going to leave not so patient. I want to say one other thing. That in my experience, I don't know. It seems to me that the concept of religion and dying for our sins and so forth and being forgiven and so forth has promoted a great deal of behavior on the part of most people that is pretty negative. They figure that, well, if they go back and they are born again and they go to Jesus, they will be forgiven, whereas the atheist has no real, he can't do that. He's not going to be forgiven, so he tends to be a lot more responsible. And he takes responsibility for his behavior directly. He hasn't got a cop-out that people, I think, have with the God thing. I had a real hard time following it.
Simon, if we offer them sandwiches based on our track record and history, are they going to think it's the Last Supper or that we're doing them on weekends?
Well, I tell you, the last people that tried to help some travelers survive, because I know it in history, we all celebrated every year, with Thanksgiving. Now, if the Indians had known what we were going to do to them, I guess they probably wouldn't have offered us corn and turkey and told us how to survive. So probably actually, offering sandwiches isn't a very good idea. I don't know.
They've always said if you receive a phone call from bars, make sure to speak slowly and enunciate very carefully. And if you get a phone call from Jupiter, please politely explain to them that they're not like as we know it and hang up.
I gotta go. Y'all can carry on. Anyone wants a schedule? I have plenty of schedules.
Everybody.
Okay, that's all right. I think I can It may have been. I don't think it's a theologian.
Hello. Her new form next week are the jeans and the men's boots.
Brilliant, Simon. Good job. Very good, funny, and
I
enlightening.
hope you don't think this is personal. I tend to get
I'm glad you're not using the battery because right outside there's going to be UFO sighted in I wouldn't want this thing to fail, that's for sure. Don't want this thing to fail. Not yet.
Joshua, appreciate
How do
it.
I, disinjector button? Oh, here it is. I'll just inject this baby when I get home. Who's this guy? It's Evan. His code name is Jabberwocky. He does work for the government.
Extremely close up.
You can find this guy in the back of milk cartons. Last known to publish a publication called The Crystal Wind. What's that?
Are you Chris?
Yeah.
Who
Hi.
picks the topics?
Usually I do. Yeah.
You ever pick political topics?